Hello, testing. Good morning and welcome. Good morning to the 12th annual Ashland Independent Film Festival. It is really great to see a full house this morning. You're here for the close-up and personal TalkBack. We have a great panel of filmmakers to talk with you this morning. Just like to ask you right now to please shut off your phones. Completely turn them off. We had so many go off yesterday morning, and it really is disturbing. So just please turn them off. Let's see, any other announcements? I think that's it for this morning. I'm so thrilled, actually, to introduce to you Lucy Walker, who's going to moderate the panel. We are honoring her this year with our Rogue Award, so we'll be doing that on Sunday evening. She's also here with her new film, The Crash Reel. We had a great screening last night, and you have a chance, if you'd like to see it, this evening at 6 o'clock. It's playing in the Armory. We're also screening a series of short films that she did about Olympic hopefuls, and that's playing tomorrow morning in the Armory, and we'll have an extended period of time for a Q&A after, so you'll get a chance to talk with Lucy then. So I hope you get a chance to seek out her films. And without further ado, I'm going to have Lucy talk to you a little bit about the panel and introduce our filmmakers. Thank you.
Hi. I, first of all, need to say thank you to Joanne before she runs away, because this is such a beautiful film festival, and it's so amazing to be here. Us filmmakers, we do a lot of tough things. We have lonely times and hard times and soul-searching times and exhausted times and completely depressing times. But then we get to go to film festivals and we get to meet each other, honestly, and actually have conversations like this and get all the tips and encouragement from each other and watch each other's films, and also meet you, the audience, directly. And for me, that's the gas in my tank, is actually meeting people and having this opportunity to introduce you, audience members, to the incredible people that I've been struggling away to make a film about. It's just this kind of great introduction service on some level to our amazing characters that we found and your amazing experiences. And then nobody's ever the same again. But this is a particularly lovely film festival, as I think you've all noticed. We've all been blown away by Ashland people, by Ashland programming, by this incredible hospitality and fellow filmmakers. So first of all, I was thinking it would be more fun for you all to introduce yourself. I just want you to know that this is an incredible group of filmmakers. This is a real treat. And yeah, it's true. And really, I personally am very excited to be sitting here and talking shop with these all. And so we'll also have plenty of questions. I think it'll be fun to be as informal and conversational as possible. We just want to get as much interesting stuff said and heard as possible in the next hour and a half. So I would suggest, why don't everyone introduce themselves, starting with Greg at the end, and coming back towards me.
Hi, I'm Greg Finton. So I'm a longtime film editor. I've been editing for over 25 years. I started my career in narrative feature films, worked on a lot of big studio films during that time, and about 13, 14 years ago, R.J. Cutler approached me about making a documentary TV series that he had just been hired to make for Fox TV, and it was called American High, and we followed first-year high school seniors, high school seniors through their last year of high school for the entire year. Made a 13-hour series, and I was immediately hooked. I never wanted to go back to narrative film after that, and so I've been in documentary ever since then. And I'm here with The World According to Dick Cheney, which is my directorial debut as well. So.
My name is Riley Hooper. I'm here with a short film called Flow. I'm screening with Shepherd and Dark. and this is like my first. I mean, I've made short films before this, but this is my first like film that I'm doing a festival circuit with.
Good morning. My name is Tad Nakamura. I'm the director of Jake Shimabukuro, Life on Four Strings, which is a hour-long documentary on a ukulele virtuoso, Japanese American from Hawaii. And just a little background: I'm born and raised in LA, and this is actually my first hour-long piece made for broadcast. And previously, I've made a trilogy of short documentaries on the Japanese American involvement in the Asian American political movement of the late 60s and early 70s. And yeah, thanks for getting up early and coming.
Yeah. My name is Jill Orschel, and this is my second time here at beautiful Ashland. And I screened Sister Wife, about a polygamous wife, in 2010. And now I'm here with another short personal documentary called Like a Dance.
My name's Ben Rosen. I'm a director along with Sam here of Black Cherokee, which is a short documentary about a street artist from Harlem. It is my second documentary. I did a feature documentary called A Stadium Story about Bloomberg's attempt to build a football stadium on the west side of Manhattan. There's a big brouhaha over that. And I work in equal parts television and film.
So I'm Sam, and I, like Ben said, here with Black Cherokee, the short, but it is also my second time here in Ashland, so super exciting to be back. I was here with a film called If a Tree Falls. I was here in 2011.
So first of all, I thought we should take a giant step back and say, what on earth are we doing making documentaries? Somebody, I don't know if the gentleman who was chit-chatting to me at breakfast is here. I don't think so. Anyway, I had a lovely chat with somebody at breakfast, but then he just started talking about how these great documentaries, but nobody saw them. And I was saying, yeah, it's tough with documentaries sometimes, and not everybody sees them, but lots of people do. And anyway, so what are we doing making documentaries? Because we could be doing other things. And I'm sort of just curious. I have a story for myself, but I'm really curious. And let's keep going with this order. I'm liking this order.
Okay, that's into it. You know, I got asked that question a lot, especially after I left the scripted world and started working in documentary. And for me, it simply boils down to, you know, in the scripted world, I remember I'd work so hard to make these larger-than-life characters, these, you know, big, giant personalities with the actors we were working with. And you're doing everything you can to make them seem like normal, everyday people. And with and with documentary, we're taking normal, everyday people, and we're doing everything we can to make them into larger-than-life characters. And for me, that was just much more satisfying at the end of the day.
I honestly don't know if I know the answer to this question. It's just sort of something that I've always been drawn to. I personally only watch documentary films, only read nonfiction books. For some reason, I just can't quite get behind fiction, and I'm not sure why, but I think that I just connect more with real stories. I think it's just, they're more powerful.
Actually, I think counter to what Lucy said, I can't do anything else, so that's why I make documentaries. In terms of narratives, I'm not a writer. I've never worked on a narrative film, so I really feel that documentary filmmaking is my only craft. But the way I got into it is I said this at my friend's, who's a teacher's career day, and he looked at me like I was crazy because I was talking to middle schoolers. But I don't read that much, and I've never read that much, you know, growing up. Yeah, I said that, and my friend was like, but so literally the honest story is that in 11th grade for the AP US History exam, that's right when the History Channel just came out, and luckily there was for every chapter in the history book there was a film, and literally I didn't read my history book, and I watched every film, and I got a 4 on the test. So that proved to me the power of documentary. So.
Yeah. Lucy, I love that question. That is so funny. I love reading fiction. I love watching dramatic films. I'm a projectionist on Saturday nights at our local art house. And but the reason I do documentary is, I don't know, it's something to do with stubbornness, wanting to figure it out. I love that idea of discovering, and like creating a narrative of the real story. I don't know, maybe it's something like putting order in chaos.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Similarly, going into a documentary project or taking a character before you know what the story is, it's daunting. But it's extremely exciting in a way that I think scripted projects, you don't quite have it. It's all predetermined. You have the script, you have the storyboard. It's almost just sort of done conceptually before you actually start filming, whereas with documentary, you have to listen and you have to collaborate and you improvise, and that is intoxicating and addictive. And yeah, so that's part of why I do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think to build off that, I started my career as a cinematographer, and I did do some shooting in fiction world, and there is a tremendous amount of patience that has to happen on set of fiction work. And similarly for documentary, but it's just a different kind of patience. And I have the patience for documentary. I don't have it for fiction, and it is sort of what Ben was saying. It's this visceral connection to the now, to the moment that it's happening, and to responding to the challenge of being truthful to that, and being able to capture it. To me, that is intoxicating, and it's something I always want to return to. So yeah.
These are great answers. I might have to steal these. I've been taking notes. And I really I think honesty is good. We are documentary filmmakers after all. So Tad, I want to give you a particularly, so I particularly appreciate that. So I think we should, let's keep on striving to be as honest as possible, because I think this is obviously what makes everyone laugh. This is good. And I think it is an amazing time for documentaries. There are sort of wonderful pieces of non-fiction film from every era that there have been films. But I sort of grew up more thinking about fiction and reading a lot of literature and watching fiction movies. And it's really more recently that I've become obsessed with non-fiction. And I kind of ask myself that, why is it seemingly such a golden age for documentary? And I sometimes think about the technology also. I think that we have these incredibly high-quality cameras now that are very portable, and media that's very affordable. And so we can afford literally to go out and shoot stuff sometimes with a very small crew, with an idea that we haven't sold to a studio for millions of dollars and gotten thousands of people to show up and lug heavy bits of equipment for. And then we have the opportunity now in the editing room with the non-linear editing system to craft a story in the editing room to an extent that wasn't possible. I mean, it wasn't not popular. It was like back in the day when you had bits of celluloid that you had to chop and stick back together. I'm old enough that I just about trained on that system right when it was, because we couldn't afford the digital, even though the digital was sort of just coming out, and then quickly flipped over. But I'm old enough to know how incredibly tough it is when you got a bin of bits of celluloid and you don't even know, because it's 16 millimeter, you can't even see what it is. And if you want to change something, you can never compare side-by-side versions because you have to actually chop up the stuff, I mean, it's just an incredibly, I don't think the comparison is even like going from a typewriter to a computer to write on, because it's so much more laborious. So now we can shoot, I mean, it used to be that 200 hours was like the most frightening amount of footage ever in a documentary. And it's rare, I think, that you hear of one less than that these days. People can shoot for hours and hours and hours of cheap tape or digital stuff. and then edit it in the editing room and craft these incredible stories that then audiences really, find, satisfying movie type of experiences. And I just wonder if there's been films that kind of inspire you all. Maybe it's older films or more recent films. Maybe it's not even documentaries. But are there any films that have been kind of key moments or light bulb kind of moments for you all, where you thought, wow, documentaries are, look at what that documentary did, and that's kind of encouraged you?
We're going to go with the same order.
I'm into it. I think it's working.
Same order. I always get to break the waves here. The first film where a light bulb really came on for me was I was just starting college, and I saw Paris, Texas. And I was really, there's just something about the way that, I couldn't put my finger on it then. I'm not even sure if I could put my finger on it now as to why it really just turned a light bulb on for me. But I came out of that film thinking, I want to make films. I want to work in film. I'd been just about every major you could be in college at that point, and I think the next day I went into like a student or a counselor, and I said, I'm going to be a filmmaker. Like, all right, let's see what, where do you want to go? Let's find out where we should place you. And so that was a seminal film for me. And this is going to sound really odd, but I was working as an assistant director when I first moved to LA and started working in the film business. I wanted to be a director like everybody else, and I had no idea how you became a director. I thought, oh, well, you must be an assistant director. That's how you work your way up, And I quickly realized that assistant directing had nothing to do with directing. It had everything to do with babysitting, and I was a babysitter when I was a teenager. I didn't like that then, and I certainly didn't want to do it as a career. I went to the theater and I saw the John Lennon documentary. It's called Imagine, I think it's called. And the switch went on again for me. I came out of the theater saying, I want to be an editor. It was just something about it. And once again, I can't really remember. It was probably just the way I'd seen, footage. There's footage in that film that we've all seen, in 100 different other places. But it was just purposed in a way that told a new story. And I sort of recognized that in some way, and just the power of editing. And so that was a big one for me. And then Hoop Dreams is probably my favorite.
Me too. No,
yeah?
you stole mine.
Oh, sorry. That's right. Imagine, that was it. That was that was the light switch.
For me, it was Salesman, which the Maisels brothers. Sorry. Got to pick a new one. Yeah, really, me too. I saw Salesman as a sophomore in college, and after I saw it, I called my mom, who's sitting right over there, and I told her, like, this is what I want to do. I want to make these types of films. It's the direct cinema style of filmmaking that, like, the Maisels brothers, among others, developed is really, I think it's very powerful. The observational style, it's very intimate and complex. I don't like films that are just like talking heads, like they're going to tell you what you should believe. I think that it's much more powerful to just be able to experience what this person is going through and draw your own conclusions from the film. So I appreciate films that are like as complex as life actually is.
Mm-hmm.
I was privileged to, both my parents are actually documentary filmmakers. So my dad, Robert Nakamura, and my mom, Karen Ishizuka. My dad in the 70s made a short documentary called Watari Dori, Birds of Passage, and that was profiling 3 of the early Issei generation, which is the first generation of Japanese Americans to come to the U.S. And one of the people that he profiled was my grandfather, was his father. And so my grandfather was a gardener, immigrant gardener. And so to me, my grandfather was this really cute old man who couldn't really move that much and listen to Dodger games and couldn't speak English. But in the film, I mean, he's this gardener and he's like ripped. I mean, he's, because he was a judo instructor at night and a gardener by day. So I mean, he's just this, you know, brute of a man. He's young, strapping, and so for me, as a, you know, growing up as a middle class kid now, just a huge reminder of, one, to remind that I come from an immigrant family and a working class family, but also two, to be able to literally hear and see my own family member that I didn't get to experience. So I really, on a very selfish level, realized the importance of just documenting at the time. But then to answer the question, you know, I think what was probably most influential style-wise, or just actually wanted me to make a film, was probably Style Wars, about the early hip-hop movement, and Dogtown and Z-Boys, as well as a film called The Mandla, which is about the role that music played in the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. And that really inspired me in terms of the power, if you document a social movement, how that inspiration, even if it was in the past, that inspiration to create change can continue to a present-day audience.
Well, when I was a little girl, I used to love all those Hollywood musicals and the Westerns, and just those films that you can just escape into. And when I was in my 20s, my husband turned me on to Roger and Me. And that was like one of the first, you know, documentary films that I really looked at closely. And I was just blown away, and that was kind of a pivotal moment for me for some reason. Not that I really acted on it right away, but I gave kind of documentaries a chance after that. And then I started, I don't know, you know, instead of movies being an escape for me, I realized that movies could be something that I could like explore, you know, my humanness, and it's not something I needs to be slick, you know. It's like we look at like tough human things about ourselves. And then looking at like Fast, Cheap, and Out of Control with Earl Morris was taking another step, you know, into being more like subjective, and not that Michael Moore isn't subjective. And like, who else do I love is, you know, just that poetry of Werner Herzog. You know, he just takes you to totally different worlds. So it's like not this documentary that's, you know, like two-sided, but just really like inner world. And I love exploring that. And Wasteland by Miss Lucy Walker was a huge, yeah.
One of my favorite films is Larry Clark's Kids, about teenagers in New York City in the early 90s. And I responded to it principally because he was working with non-actors. He was working with kids who actually grew up in New York City, as I did. And there was such an authenticity to that approach to filmmaking. He was also working with a script, but he working with non-actors, that was inspiring to me, that you could get just incredibly naturalistic, authentic performances, just, you know, working with the real people. In a former life, I was an actor, and so I've always been interested in human behavior. And as an actor, I feel like I was always sort of interested in just common everyday behavior, not necessarily the big dramatic stuff. I wasn't like a big fan of like the theater scene and like people who would act like actors and were, you know, just, you know, sort of big personalities. I just kind of liked, I was drawn to like the everyday, and so I was inspired by Larry Clark's film, and then likewise when I was exposed to Maysles Brothers films, Salesman, Grey Garden, and that to me, you know, they just take a frame on and it focuses on people, and you know, I mean, he's just a fly on the wall, and I don't know, I'm losing my way here, but I'm just a big fan of his film. So
When I was growing up, there was a culture of movies in my house. I think when I was 5, I saw Caddyshack, which was kind of crazy that my mother took me to that film. But I don't know. I think I came into films and movies just as like as an appreciator, as a lover. So I saw like all the 70s classics and, you know, Stanley Kubrick and all this stuff that I think meant a lot to me. But I never thought of myself as wanting to be a filmmaker. I thought I was going to be an artist, like a painter or a printmaker, which I eventually tried. And then it was only until after my college years I was kind of came into thinking about documentaries mainly out of a curiosity in the world for the world, and a desire to try and tell stories that seemed relevant. And I saw a film called Hearts and Minds, which is an old movie, in 1974, I think. And that film, we talk now about how documentary, the form, has sort of changed and been so innovative. That film is so innovative, and I think what that film was able to do, I think we can all learn from now today. And it has an amazing balance of verite scenes, moments in time that are observational, that sort of break your heart and open your minds up to curiosity. But at the same time, it's so rooted in really very real political and social issues that the filmmakers did not shy away from. And to me, that's sort of like an unbelievable hybrid that I think is like the ideal in filmmaking. So it inspired me to say, you know what, forget art, let's make documentaries.
I love these comments. They're all great, and these are all amazing films that I love. And I would definitely pick Hoop Dreams as well, because for me, one thing that's amazing about that film, and one of the things that I love about documentaries, and some of my films have some of the more of this than others. My current film, Crash Reel, definitely has it, and I really love it, is when you see people through a long period, and you, through film, get this opportunity to see kind of how life happens. In an hour and a half or so, you can see 5 years in that movie, in my movie Crash Reel, in a way you can see sort of 25 years in some level, but definitely 5 years, and you kind of get to see how life kind of operates. It's like a little sneak at the machinery when you really see sort of how things play out, how people physically change. I always think they gave Anne Hathaway an Oscar for losing a little bit of weight and cutting her hair off. I mean, our people, what they go through and what you see in terms of like how life sort of ravages us or plumps us up or, whatever it does, it's just all and all the different decisions and how they play out. I just think that's amazing. Another film that I loved that nobody's ever heard of, but I would highly recommend it if anyone ever gets a chance. It's a film called Streetwise, 1980 film about street kids in Seattle. And what blew my mind, the light bulb in that for me was like, how is somebody in the room with these kids? Because there's a couple of 14-year-old homeless kids kind of flirting and falling in love. There's one kid that dies, and you're just there. And the filmmakers had managed to be in the room and capture life again happening with these people that you wouldn't ordinarily get to meet, and it'll break your heart because you really feel like you get to know and understand and love these people, and you're not there, but you could be them. You could be walking a little ways in their shoes. It feels almost like you're under their skin in that way because the filmmaker has managed to get in there. And so I sort of want to get to the theme of our panel a little bit about getting up close and personal, and how we get that amazing feeling, which I think you all do in your films, that you really get an opportunity to know people. And so I guess maybe we should dive right into people's current films, maybe as a good example. But what I guess kind of is interesting is to think about, maybe we can talk about when you're coming to decide to make a film, what sort of thought process do you go through? And for example, my film, The Crash Reel, began when I met Kevin. But I go through a whole sort of process, and I'm thinking about it right now as well, because I'm sort of thinking about new films and what I might do next. And you kind of go, when you're deciding whether to take on these films, they're kind of a big responsibility, documentaries. You know, you feel like there's somehow a big responsibility to once you start them. You know, it's all kinds of psychic distress if you can't finish them, right? And so they're a real burden, and you sort of want to do justice, especially because there's real people, and there's the truth, and but it's a lot of work, and so it's a big responsibility. And of course, to the audience, that's a big responsibility too, because you want to deliver something that's really going to be very satisfying and pleasing to the audience and worth taking up their precious moments of life to watch. And so I sort of go through this whole process when I meet somebody or hear about something or think about something. Well, would this make a good movie? And what's this person like? And what would I have to do to make this a film? And I'm just kind of curious to think that process through out loud, because I think that's quite kind of illuminating. Should we switch orders? Are you game for this, Greg? You're so good at going first. And you also have quite an intriguing character in your current film.
You've heard of him? Yeah, my character is a very obscure, not very well known, character. So yeah. When RJ first approached me about doing the film, I was very hesitant about doing it, and I wasn't sure I was going to do it. But we just, he said, let's really think about. Let's just think about him as a film character. Now, and then so we started breaking that down.
I'm gonna have to tell people who he is. Does everybody know? Some people must not know.
It's Dick Cheney. So my film is The World According to Dick Cheney, and Showtime had approached us about with the idea of making the film about him. They wanted to launch this series. The film launched the series that they're now doing about profiles about controversial American figures. And so when we first started talking about it, we thought, well, let's just sort of break him down, So to think of him as just as a film character, you've got this guy who grew up poor in the Midwest, went on to become a college dropout, got arrested twice for DUIs, and then ultimately is able to pull himself back together and rise to become the most powerful non-presidential figure we've ever had in this country, and then at the end sort of loses power again. So that was like, as a film character, that's a very dramatic character, and as a documentary character, that's an incredibly dramatic character. So that was just sort of the way in to approach the film, and that's what we. That's how we sort of started getting our heads around.
And were you and do you go through like, ooh, but will we get access? Ooh, but have the people heard it before? Ooh, but will people hate me because they'll think that I like him?
Yes, all of that. I can't tell you. Absolutely yes to every one of those questions. Absolutely. And probably so many like Facebook friends are like, "You're not really gonna do this, are you? You're not gonna you're gonna get won over to the dark side. I know it. Just what was the?
Well, yeah. I mean, I just feel like what's that process? Because I have this, very funny internal dialogue going where I'm sort of talking to myself and saying, well, that could be really interesting. Oh no, wait, people have seen it before. Or
right.
Oh wait, but that's kind of interesting. Oh, but wait, they're never going to let's film that.
Right.
Oh, but wait, I could film this bit of it. That sort of thing.
Right, and we never really thought that he would participate in the film, so we were going to make the film regardless, and we started making the film. I was editing for a good 6-7 months before he finally even agreed to participate in it and to be a character. And then, of course, once he said yes, then all the people who had originally said no, like Donald Rumsfeld and Addington, they all eventually said yes as well. So yeah, I mean, we were operating for half a year on the premise that we weren't going to get him, and that we were going to have to make the film, in a different way and with a different, a whole different angle in a certain sense. Yeah.
But it's such an important story to tell, and when you were sort of arguing out with yourself, oh no, the Facebook friends aren't going to like it, but what was the thing that you thought, what kind of ultimately made you excited to do? Because it's an enormous amount of work. That's the other thing. Do people understand? Do you know how long it takes to edit a documentary? It takes talking about time and revealing life and time ravaging people. My goodness. And a documentary editing process will ravage a person and take a few months or years out of a life.
Right. And I was coming from a ravaged experience of editing and waiting for Superman, where it was, I was really happy with the film and happy with what we did, but it was a long, excruciating process.
For example, dare we? I mean, I'm always in sort of denial about how long films take.
Yeah.
Or
so Superman was 18 months for me. I think my assistant was like 22 months on the film. And The World According to Dick Cheney was 18 months for me as well. And I gave a talk at USC a couple weeks ago, and said that same thing. And one of the students asked later to raise his hand. He said, "So, how many other jobs were you doing during that time? What were you? Was that just a part-time thing?"
And what hours were you working? It's also a frightening question.
If I could just jump in, I going back to the technology that makes it so easy to go out and shoot a bundle of footage, that sort of puts a burden on the post-production process, because it is, these cameras you can just shoot forever, and you're amassing all of as much coverage as you possibly can. When in doubt, just record. But then, of course, that makes editing quite a task.
Yeah.
I would just add, you talked about the internal dialogue.
Yeah.
For me, and part of this conversation, part of the internal dialogue when you're introduced to a story that you may or may not follow is do I have the stomach and the heart to see this through for years? Because it's not just the years that you're making the film, it's the years that you're involved with the people whose lives you've been so inherently enmeshed in, and then giving birth to the movie and talking about it, and that is a very long process that I think what I try and ask myself is, will I still want to talk about this in 4 or 5 years? And to me, if I can answer that question, then yes, and I'm going to go out and make that movie. I think that's an important process to go through, because the worst thing in the world is to finish a film and then be I don't want to talk about it anymore. I don't want it in my life. How horrible.
And maybe you can keep going, you two, and about talking about your film and the journey and how you got involved in that.
Well, our film actually took a long time. It shouldn't have taken a long time to make, because we didn't shoot that much. But we were working on it while we were doing other things. It was a sort of a film that we kind of did on the side. We thought actually that it could be a feature, and maybe it could have been, but other things in our lives interceded, and so it is.
Shorts are good. I feel like short documentaries are great, and why make them? I had such a great experience making shorts recently, and sometimes people try to make everything should be a feature.
Yeah.
But I think short is the new long with our attention span and video. It's true, and sometimes stories aren't. Sometimes stories are great, but they're great at a smaller length. And actually, there's a lot of films I think, man, that would have been a fabulous 20, 30, 40-minute film, but people feel obliged to do a 90-minute film because it feels more grown up or something.
Well, it's more than that, as you know.
Yeah,
it's also
true.
it's about the economics of the business that we work in. I mean, unfortunately, there isn't as much of a venue for shorts as there is for features, for getting it seen, and that's a sad thing, because obviously when you make a work, you want it to be seen, you want to share it with people, and you want to experience that bounce back of having worked on something and cared for something, and so I think that probably motivates people to try and make something longer so that they can have that experience to share it with people. I don't want to hog.
But yeah, back to your film. Sorry. So your film was a labor of love on the side while you were busy with other things.
Right, and we didn't know what the story was going forward. I mean, so that is it was one of those things where we have a very interesting human being who he's a performance artist. He performs along a highway in Manhattan. And we were both fans of his over a number of years. And so we felt like, there must be, he was worthy of documentation. And so the first few shoots, it was just kind of filming him doing his thing, but we didn't know what the story was. And so that was kind of one of these like classic documentary existential moments where you're just like, you're filming and you're kind of listening, but then you're hoping that a storyline will emerge, but you don't want to manipulate, eventually a story emerged, as it inevitably does. But it doesn't always. Another interesting thing about documentaries is you can start filming something, and if you don't, if it's not working, if there's not a story there, you can lay it down, put it to bed, and it's not the end of the world.
Better to fold a hand sometimes.
Yeah, right.
Learning when to fold your hand is a good skill,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, and also just in terms of preparation, something that I love about this business is that each documentary subject sort of requires a different strategy and a different approach. My previous featured documentary was about a development battle in New York City, and there were all sorts of different constituents, just dozens and dozens of principal characters. And so that required one approach, and this is about a sort of a solitary figure, and that's a very different approach. It's almost like just a totally different endeavor, and that's exciting because for me, each project presents a new challenge, and it's not just like the same old thing. It's you have to adapt, you have to customize your approach. I work in I direct and produce reality TV. Same thing with that. Whatever subject I'm producing requires a unique approach. So that's very satisfying.
Well, I think I'm just noticing how I operate with the films that I do, and I'm usually focusing on one subject, like a film subject, their personal lives, and I'm realizing that I kind of have, it's like a triangle. One is the essence of the person, their story, and I'm not like looking for the truth, but like a truth, like that I see. Then there's how, if I'm going to be really excited about it, like I need to find like a thread of the theme that I can totally relate to, so I can be excited about this whole grueling process for the next couple years of my life. And then there's the third thing that I'm having a really difficult time with, and that is the film that the film subject sees in their mind. And, you guys get that? And it is really like a dance that you have to, negotiate constantly in your mind with them. Sometimes I find myself like trying to communicate what I'm thinking, just like I'm doing right now with you, to the film subject, and that kind of digs even a deeper hole. So it is a process, and I do keep asking myself, why am I doing it? But then at the end of it, I realize, oh, I got that essence. I go back to that first part of the triangle, always honoring that, and that always makes it worthwhile.
For the Jake Shimabukuro documentary, it was the first kind of commissioned film that I've done. So when the production company Center for Asian American Media approached me with the film, I felt I had a very good kind of positioning, because I felt that I was probably the same distance to him as your average viewer of the film, meaning I didn't have his albums. I'd heard about his name, and I saw one or two YouTube clips, but that was about it. So I wasn't a big fan. I wasn't a personal friend. And so I think for me and for the whole team, the whole time was really thinking about who your audience is for the film. And so if someone like Jake is interesting, because on one hand, in Hawaii, he's old news. Amongst the ukulele community, he's a god. Amongst your average person, probably don't know. And so really in terms of what we want to do with the film is provide something for each of those. So the goal for the Hawaii crew, audience was to show that he actually has working class roots, because I think a lot of people just assume he's a superstar because they see him on TV all the time at home. And then for the ukulele fans, really try to give more a sense of his history, his connection to his community, and not just his music. And then for a general audience is trying to introduce a virtuoso and try to convince the audience that he's a legitimate kind of virtuoso of our times. So I think that was part of the story. I think for everyone agrees, or I don't know, I would assume most directors making documentaries, you realize it's all about story, right? It's story, story, story. And at first when someone told me that, I was like, that doesn't make sense. You know the story. But it's more, how to translate, especially on a biopic, how to translate someone's experience into a story. And then you're really manipulating, or you have the ability to manipulate someone's experience. And so that is a big responsibility. And then I think for me, we're just lucky, and I think for anyone who's working with a subject, it's all about trust. That's your subject trusting you, you trusting your subject. And it really took a good year. I worked on the film for 3 years, and so it really took the first year to break down, have Jake really trust in me. And that's actually when we really started getting into the good stuff, was after a year of production.
My film is about a New York City street photographer, and I came across this subject because I have a friend who used to work at an art gallery that represents artists over the age of 60. And when she told me that, I kind of freaked out because I was really excited because I really like elderly people and I like art, so it was kind of a no-brainer for me in terms of approaching the subject. I think as documentary filmmakers, we're telling stories about the human experience, and what better way to do that than with someone who has had so many experiences and is so wise. And if we're talking about how long it took us to make the film, it's kind of, I feel weird being up here because I shot with Flo twice. And then it took me like a month to edit the film. So
it's okay. We like that. That's good. These are encouraging stories.
I totally am looking forward to a film that in the future where it'll take up my whole life, and I will not my whole life, but just like years. I don't want to keep doing this.
I feel like this is, it's a little bit like when the dealer gives you the first hit for free or something to make a beautiful film, and then you get hooked, but it's okay. I wish that you have quick and easy films, and some are. I think some, like with all creative projects, some happen quickly and some don't, and that everyone is its own creature and has its own gestation, and but we love it when it's easy. We don't.
I'll take it.
Totally. So many different ways to go, and I want to open up to questions shortly, so you should be thinking about questions. I was going to go a little bit more deeply into this idea of the relationship with the character, because it's a funny relationship. My experience, I must say, is overwhelmingly positive. I think sometimes you can you can have a bad reputation sometimes. Maybe it's a kind of reality TV kind of reputation where, you barge into somebody's life and you manipulate everything and you make them do stuff that's not at all like what they do, and you completely, make them look terrible. And then you run away and make lots of money and leave them to their damaged lives. And I feel like the opposite is true, honestly. And I feel I've experienced this, again, great responsibility of realizing that the people that I often am filming have never had, or have rarely had, people paying any kind of this kind of attention to them in terms of wanting to hear what they feel, wanting to understand their experience, wanting to tell their story. And that you have this opportunity, you're sort of holding a mirror up for them to reflect on their lives. And that mirror is sort of like also a sort of two-way mirror, because the audience is getting to look in, but they're also getting an opportunity to reflect on their lives. And you are some part therapist, some part filmmaker, some part, companion, because they've got to want to have you around. So there's a relationship just in terms of arranging to spend time together. And often that can be a deep friendship that or a close relationship that really does endure. But it's also a very tense relationship because there's a lot at stake, how people are represented, how a film appears, can be very stressful. It can change people's lives. It's a very powerful thing. I just have a few stories. I have so many stories, but one story, the camera is affecting everything always. Even I did a film about blind Tibetan teenagers and an amazing blind American man. You're nodding, maybe you've seen it. No, but anyway, I thought maybe somebody had seen it. It's called Blind Sight. But you've seen it. Somebody's seen it. I love it. It's not, but of all my films, it's been the least well distributed, but I love it. But it's the amazing blind American mountaineer, Eric Weinmeier, climbs Mount Everest and then hears from this blind school in Tibet, and he's so moved by them, he goes back and takes them to climb the mountain next to Everest, and then everything goes really wrong. And it's interesting. And but the one of Eric's, the blind guy, American mates, is guiding these blind Tibetan teenagers. I'll never forget, there was one moment where this blind Tibetan 15-year-old is being guided basically up Everest, but with this American guy, and we're filming, and he says, "Say, Greg, why, when you're talking to Lucy, does your arm get bigger?" I was like, this is a blind kid who's noticed that every time I'm filming, the guy is like puffing up his biceps. She's like, you just realize, just like, there's just nothing that's the same when you're filming, and it's just, yeah, right? And then in that film, I'm just going to keep going with that example from that film. In that film, we get to about 21,500 feet, which, if anyone knows altitude, is really, really, really high. It's higher than base camp. It's really high. Everyone's got a terrible headache. You're in the death zone. The death zone starts about 19,000 feet. Your body is, dying, and it feels that way. And everyone just started having terrible argument about what on earth we were doing, trying to climb this terrible mountain with a bunch of blind Tibetan teenagers who didn't like mountain climbing. Traditionally, Tibetans don't climb mountains. Having to go up mountains is a hassle. The yaks need to eat, but you really don't want to go up there if you don't have to. And besides, they're kind of sacred, so it's better to kind of go around them. So, and then we've got the American mountaineers, and it's all about standing on top. And he's right, you can make a big point about what blind people are capable of when you climb to the top of Mount Everest as a blind man. And then you've got the blind German teacher who's just all about togetherness and doesn't want to break the group up and is worried about them getting sick and falling in crevasses, which is all actually happening, so she's not wrong either. And they had a fantastic row fueled by the huge irritability that everyone gets at altitude, and including the crew. So everyone wants to kill each other. Who's got blue lips. The whole thing's just like an awful experience. And somehow I'm responsible for filming this while I also have an altitude migraine. Our doctor's already descended because he's got pulmonary edema, a kind of fatal form of acute altitude illness. So he's gone down and unfortunately didn't die, but was very close. And so this whole thing, and your son trying to make a film. And anyway, so then we come to the world premiere of the film. And the climax of this film, sort of in one way, is this awful argument that everyone has. And then the expedition, we don't climb the mountain. And actually some other stuff happens that's wonderful and the better sort of finale for the film than the original plan of climbing the mountain. But it's a difficult moment, and you're editing it together. And I had this experience and the world premiere in Toronto suddenly, and you've been so nervous about getting the film made and getting the film into a film festival, and you're so excited to get to a film festival, and then you get to the film festival and it suddenly occurs to you that people might not like the film in the audience, because I don't know, all along. I remember my first film when it first got to Sundance, my film Devil's Playground. I'd been so excited about getting into Sundance. And it was only when I got there I was like, oh, it's not so the end goal. This is a whole new problem. It's like, what are they going to think about the film at Sundance? And then, it's terrifying. I was actually terrified to speak. I couldn't actually speak. I went to introduce my film and I just pointed at the screen and ran off. I was just so nervous looking at everyone. And then, so I got to Toronto. This was my second film. And this time the people were there. My first film, some of the Amish kids had been able to make some of the screenings, but none of them had been able to make the world premiere. But Toronto, they'd all come. And suddenly you realize, like, oh my goodness, they all have very different points of view, and there was a lot of tension. And it makes for a very dramatic and interesting film. And everyone's great, and what's great is, nobody's wrong, and they're all amazing. But anyway, what was amazing was after the film, and I was so incredibly tense, they all came to me separately and thanked me because they really felt like they had gotten their point across and the most important points had been made. And they were really grateful about how they had appeared, and they really liked the film. But they were really worried that everyone else must hate how they came across. And what was funny was that everybody had the same reaction. And I thought that was a really good sign of, like, I'd gotten it right, because if everyone felt like they'd come across in how they appear, and in this argument, they genuinely had really different points of view, and they were all really valid points of view. But what was great was that they said they were worried about everyone else, and because they felt that everyone else appeared to come across really badly, but they didn't. It was just a different point of view. Anyway, so it's sort of interesting, but it's very difficult because you're dealing with real people, and you're dealing with a real film. My film, Devil's Playground, was about Amish kids, and I had a terrible experience with one of the people I'd been filming with and gotten amazing footage, who has actually joined the Amish, and most Amish people don't like to be filmed, but some can in certain districts for certain reasons. And we got this amazing footage, and then one day I showed up to film, and he said, and what is your book going to be called? And I said, well, it's not a book, it's a documentary. He said, yeah, a documentary is a book, right? And I was like, no, and he's like, and I had to explain to him that we were filming, and he'd noticed the camera and that we were filming, and it was a documentary, and he was like, no, I thought it was a book. And I was like, no, it wasn't. Anyway, so it turned out that actually he thought the bishop would not approve, and that he'd go to hell if he had the film, appeared in the film. So I couldn't use the footage, obviously. And in that case, of course, what am I going to make the guy think he's going to hell? I mean, he'd signed a release form, so I could technically use it. It would be legally completely fine. But I was like, you can't send a guy to hell. This is clear. I mean, there's a line someplace, but this is just a long way from the line, right? So that footage we didn't get to use. And I think some people might have used it, but I felt like you couldn't possibly use it. But it's difficult sometimes because you're dealing with real people. And I personally find it's a great source of stress, actually. Because it's real people, but it's a real film, but it's the truth, and it's a very delicate. Greg is nodding. Off you go, Greg.
Unfortunately, I've got to run off to a Q&A now. I've got pulled away. We forgot about it, but I think, like, you mentioned, you were talking about reality TV and documentary. I think, because I've worked on some reality TV in the past too, and I think the biggest difference is that with reality TV, we're mostly making people be who we want them to be. And with documentary, you're letting your characters be who they really are. And I think that's the main difference between the two forms, So with that, I
can't say anything about the challenges of working with such a sensitive figure. As you're walking out.
The challenges of working with such a they were. How
do you struggle? And as an editor, because it's how you. The other thing that's really interesting, I do feedback screenings every sort of week or so. I'll drag a few friends into the editing room and give them questionnaires and stuff. And I'm always interested in how likable people are. And what's really interesting is you can really tweak things, like depending on what you show of people, you can get the audience hating them or loving them. And it is actually easy to manipulate,
Yeah, of course, and obviously it would be incredibly easy to manipulate, this story one way or another. But we felt like the real power in making the film would be to let the facts speak for themselves and let the truth really, speak for itself. And ultimately, I think it's much more powerful to do it that way, And so it's not just subjective opinion. These are objective facts about what really happened. And the challenge of working with him as a character is that he is completely unrepentant as a character. He's not going to change. We knew that kind of going in. I mean, every interview he's ever given, every book he's ever written, everything is about how he would do everything exactly the same way that he did it. And so as an editor, I was thinking, okay, so the challenge is how are we going to make a dramatic arc to this? How we're going to have a main character who refuses to change, flat out refuses to change. So I ultimately just realized that, the world is going to change around him. He'll stay the same, but the world will be what changes, and I think that's what we ultimately were able to do.
Amazing. And we've obviously missed the screening, which I'm very sad to hear is the last screening here, but it's going to be on Showtime, so everyone should check it out.
In fact, it's already been playing on Showtime, which has been so amazing and thrilling to have the audiences that we've had for our screenings. It's been really, really spectacular. And this is also my first time in Ashland, and I'm just having the best time. I really, really love the city here. It's really fantastic.
Right.
Thank you.
Now you can go.
Now I got to go.
Okay.
Talk about how I've been won over to the dark side.
All right, who else wants to talk about their relationship? And I'm interested with you, Jill. What is that relationship like when it's yourself? Isn't that?
Well, what's the question?
We're talking about, I think, that relationship with that delicate relationship that you have, the dance, as you put it, with your subject. But in your case, currently, your subject is yourself.
Right, exactly. Well, Like a Dance isn't about me, but I feel like I'm in there, right, as a reflection, grappling with issues about myself. So, in Like a Dance's case, Catalina, who has dreams to be a dancer, and also she was a great athlete. She's a hockey player and a skier, and I know her parents. And I asked her father to do the cinematography. He does a lot of commercial work, and he's from Europe and just really incredible. But he wanted to shoot her doing skiing and playing hockey. And I realized in my mind, I kind of think about like what Greg was saying. You think about your characters as real people as characters in a narrative. So you kind of have to put the separation. So I'm doing that, trying to serve the film, but you hate talking about real people in this light. And I'm even, again, I'm trying to be about transparency and being open. And I'm saying to Catalina, okay, so our hero wants to. And anyways, I kind of lost my train of thought, but I did write here, pulling the plug. It seems like every project, there is a moment that somebody wants to pull the plug on it, including me. Like I find myself doing little sabotages, like, okay, I don't know if we can, keep going. Do we really all want to invest our time in this? And so that's like that kind of Jesus talk or, moment that everybody has to have. And I'm having a moment right now with a new subject that they started getting really afraid. And so every time, the crew, the subjects, myself, we have to step over that line. And I think there's a film about this, the creative process, what's that called? That deals with this. You got to, I don't know how you guys feel, but it's like almost like you got to jump the cliff together. And it has to kind of come on its own time. But I'm right in the process of trying to jump into the cliff. I'm not sure. Do I talk more? Do I give them space? Everyone is a little different, So.
I guess I would just add, I think part of the process for that is like, I don't know if it's a come to Jesus moment, but I think there's always a process in a film that is heavily character-centric or people-centric, where you have to, and hopefully it's early on, but sometimes even though people hear it early on, they don't really understand it until later. But you have to have this understanding where the film is about them, but it's not for them. Which is a really, really difficult thing to understand, because at the same time you're taking from their life, and they're aware of that, and you're aware of that, and you feel a responsibility for that. But the responsibility doesn't mean that this film is then for you, because it can't be, because that's not a film, that's advertising. So.
I mean, like I said, my film is so short. I'm not sure I can exactly talk about this.
Did you? And it's such a beautiful short film, and maybe maybe it's possible with a shorter film to have a simpler relationship where it's a portrait. And was she happy with the finished film? And
yeah, I had a screening when she had her art opening, and she really loved the film. And a lot of her really close friends came up to me and said that I portrayed her like very accurately. I think that I did an interview with her, and she was such a great interview subject, because I would ask her a question, and then she would just go off and tell this like beautifully told story, perfectly formulated. And so it was really easy to cut together and to, draw different themes out of the things that she said. So
she went there as well. I mean, she's talking about sort of, she's fun. I mean, I always think with characters, what's one of the things that's one of my kind of questions that I ask myself in my brain is how much are they going to give up? How much are they going to reveal? Mm-hmm. Because the people that are really uptight, which I might be, by the way, I'm not sure I'd make a very good, in fact, I'm pretty sure I'd make a horrible documentary subject, because I'd be all like second guessing and wondering if I should say that, or I'd hurt somebody's feelings and something like that. But, what you want is these people that aren't afraid to tell you about their explicit photography and so on, and show you their, their dirty photos and talk about it and stuff like that. I remember when I was looking around and meeting these Amish kids and figuring out who would be good to film, and it was my first film and I was trying to figure it out. There's kids that even when you're not filming, if you're smoking a cigarette, they'll hold it behind their back and they'll say, no, they don't smoke, they're just holding it. And, you're not even filming. And whereas there's this other kid who's like chopping up drugs in front of you, and then he's taking some before he deals it because he wants to take that for himself. And you're like, and he's talking about how he wants to be a bishop like his dad, and he's quoting verses from the Bible, and you're like, that kid, that one's interesting, and he doesn't seem to, be holding back at all, and yet he's got this kind of hip hop thing going on, but he's Amish, and you're like, whoa, this is, and those people that are going to go there, I have a horror of the uptight people or the uptight institutions, and that's also why Greg's film is kind of amazing, because you're like, who would think Dick Cheney would give you an interview? I wouldn't, and so I think that you had a great nose for a great subject, and then it was easier, because I feel like a lot of times with documentary films, one of the great skills is picking your subject. And if you pick a great subject who's got interesting stuff and wants to share it, then the audience can really, that's how when I'm watching a film, the people who are telling honestly about even their horrific struggles, the reason I think my films are amazing is the extent to which the people are prepared in the crash reel. It's the fact that there's this horrible brain injury and it's really, really hard, and this family there was never a moment where they said, we can't talk about that, we can't film that. Mm-hmm. They led us into their deepest troubles. And then as human beings, we recognize that and we're like, oh, that's, what life is like. Whereas everyone pretending to be fine. The worst is people having a good time. People having a good time on the screen is like screen death. Exactly. It's like, oh, we're fine. We're having a great time. Like, boring. It's the world's most boring thing, right? And so what you want is, the pain and the honesty, and, as Tad said, the honesty is good, I think.
I would just say, I would say that this being sort of the reality TV documentary age, people are so conscious of what a nonfiction, whether it's television or film, what that is. So it's kind of hard to find people who aren't self-conscious. I mean, everybody, to some degree, when you put a camera in front of them, they kind of know a little bit about what you're trying to do. And so I think it's my experience, in documentary and reality TV, that it's very rare to find someone who is completely unself-conscious, which is, the ideal character, somebody who's just going to ignore you and do their thing and be an open book to you. But most of the time, people are, just sort of anticipating your moves. You can see the wheels turning when you're asking them questions. And that's a challenge because, you're trying to tell a story, you're trying to tell their story. But, oftentimes they want to maintain some sort of control, or they're concerned about how they're going to be portrayed, so.
Actually, yeah, and I think, like you said, I totally agree that people having a good time is death on screen. And that was probably the hardest part with Jake, because he's the most positive, happy person you'll ever meet. I mean, like literally for the first 2 shoots, every time he'd see the camera, he'd just be like, all right, And I had to tell him, I was like, Jake, no more thumbs up, just no more thumbs. And because as a director, you want an arc, right? And if your character doesn't go through any struggle, there's no development, therefore there's no arc.
Drama,
and drama, conflict. And so with Jake, I found I had to catch myself kind of in the middle of the editing process of really, because I already could hear the criticisms, right? Same thing of what will audiences, and I already could hear it's a promotional piece, it's a puff piece, whereas, and then I think especially with music documentaries, unfortunately, like VH1 Behind the Music has established this talent, rise to stardom, coke, bad failed marriage, rehab, comeback. I mean, it's all the same thing. And, and with Jake, I was actually looking, I wanted to dig deeper and find what that conflict was, but he really, what you see is what you get. And it took me a long time, because I was like, come on, man, you're so conscious, media conscious, what are you hiding? And he really wasn't hiding anything. And I think I had to check myself and say, as a director, I had to hold back, because I actually wanted to, but at the same time, you don't want to, in a way, you want to create something bad, right? And I had to catch myself, and it's like, why do that when there's nothing really there? So I think that was the biggest challenge, and I finally just had to come to, as my own responsibility as a filmmaker, I was going to present him as a person I got to know in the last 3 years, and that's what. And I think a lot of people feel, where's the coke addiction, where's his illegitimate child and stuff like that, because that's what makes good, at least TV, but also I think a fun part about working with someone so close to me was that Jake and I are very, very similar personalities, and even though we didn't know each other before we made the film, I think actually through most of my films, I didn't know it, I wasn't as conscious of it, but I think you always project, it's a little bit about yourself as a director through your character, so whether it's projection, but I definitely was working out a lot of issues that I had that I could see in Jake, and then I think most films won't have that soul or have that real emotion if the director is not able to put their own life experience kind of in that storytelling. And that's the fun part, right? Because that's where I think as a documentary filmmaker, you're not writing narratives, you're not creating things, but at the same time, you're still interacting and you're still very much able to express yourself and work a lot of psychological issues and things out, either present or past.
So I'm curious if anyone has questions. Is that a hand right at the back there?
I wanted to know if any of your subjects felt differently about themselves once they saw what you had produced.
Yeah, good question. I think definitely. I think that it's very life-changing having a film made about you. And yeah. I wonder. I'm curious, and I'm curious. I think it is. I think it's a powerful mirror, and and a very intense experience. And I don't think anything is the same afterwards. I don't know, I'm trying to think of good little anecdotes or thoughts about that, but that's my hunch.
When I did Sister Wife, my subject, Dorianne, who was a polygamous wife in a family, married to a husband with her younger biological sister, and it was the first time in the process of making the film where she was able to talk about these things, about what it really meant, and just really dig deep inside her and go, what is going on? Like, she was able to express what it was like when her husband and younger sister were having sex in the other room. I mean, she really was able to express that for the first time, like out loud. And here it is, 4 years later, and she's out of the marriage now. And I think if she was here right now, I think she might say that the process of making that film and talking to audiences afterwards gave her the feeling of, wow, I have a voice. It's really cool to see.
And I think it depends on who the subject is. For example, I think Jake, because he's well known, he's had media, I think it's just another thing that's much more, I think he feels good about it, but he's used to seeing himself. But whereas my previous films, it's usually kind of like you said, documenting people who are not used to being documented. And for those first films, they were in a historical context. So I think it's very legitimizing to their experience. If because them, I think most people are saying, what, me? You want to make a film about me or what I did? Why? I'm not special. But then, when you do treat them as if they're someone like Jake, and they see themselves screened at venues like, the Ashland Film Festival, it really does legitimize their experience and the work they've done, which I think is very gratifying as a filmmaker.
There's a question.
Yeah, outside of the film festival circuit, how do you expect people to see your films? And another question, out of your whole project, what percentage of the work is editing?
Questions. I was actually going to throw that question out to you all, and I was curious, how do you all get to see documentaries? Is it Netflix, or is it TV, or Netflix and shout out. Hulu, yes.7anybody else? YouTube, Pirate Bay, Snack Film. I think that this new streaming and Netflix kind of stuff has actually been really good for documentaries. I think people are able to find them. Airplanes are always pretty good. My films are always on airplanes. I'm always surprised. I'm on airplanes. I'm always thinking, shouldn't I get an upgrade? I've never have. But it's really fun. I can walk up and down the aisle and spot people watching my film. Not that many. Most people watch the action films, but on long-haul flights, Virgin Atlantic seems to always screen my films. It's great. So a few people watch them. But yeah, I'm always at the back of the plane. Anyway, but how do people... So I think that for me, it's really thrilling to see people to be at film festivals, because that kind of as you can see, this incredible opportunity to have FaceTime and meet people and really understand the whole process and feel really connected, and also see it in the community. And I think that's a really ideal experience. But TV is pretty great too, and it is tough to get people to go to see documentaries in movie theaters. But when some places it works. I think often with a really good community and really good curator, and if it's a really nice, theater, I think that, and a great community sort of feeling, I think that's good. Editing is, I guess, sort of time-wise more than half of the film, depending. Every film's a little bit different. You're shaking your head. I mean, yeah. Yeah. And some films kind of are found very quickly in the editing room, and some films aren't. And sometimes what I do is I'll shoot over a long period of time, like Crash Reel was shot over 3 years or something, but edited quite quickly in 6 months or something. But I wasn't doing it full time. So that's the other way that I can do it. It comes a point in the process where I go completely full time on a film, but until that time it's a little bit sporadic. So everything's different. There's one.
So, Sam, I was really intrigued with what you said about that you made the film about the person but not for them. And that really struck me. And then you mentioned that there were certain bits of film you didn't use out of respect for the individual. So the question I have is, if you have a subject, do you actually screen the film for that person, you know, as you're going to quote unquote get their permission for it in advance, or are they just looking at that film at the end and going, whoa?
Such a good question, yeah.
Because there is this, you know, this sense of wanting to respect the person, but still tell the story as a film. Anyway, you know what I'm saying.
It's such an important question. That's right. And anyone want to tackle it? Yeah, go for it.
I mean, I think just to further that idea, yes. The funny thing is, like, from a business standpoint, which is a weird thing to say because even think of documentaries as a business is sort of absurd, but you have their permission once you hopefully have them sign a release. And so you kind of have that free range. But of course, your heart and your soul is connected to this person who is the subject of your film or somehow wedded to your film, and it would be a horrible thing to make a film that they didn't approve of. So for me, I always want to show my subjects the movie that they took the time to contribute to and be part of. But it's always with the understanding that, like, I want to hear your feedback, but you have to know that I'm not necessarily going to take what you say to make changes. But it's important to get that feedback because you, of course, experience what you've gone through together by filming this thing, and you have your own subjective understanding of it. To hear them sort of comment back on it, I think it is informative and part of the process. So hopefully you're not making major changes, but I think it would be a mistake to not show a project to someone that has contributed as much to it.
I had one exception, actually, interestingly. My current film, The Crash Reel, about Kevin, who has a brain injury, and his brother, David, who has Down syndrome. It was really difficult. And his parents, who are amazing, amazing people, Simon Pierce, the famous glassblower, and his mom, Pia, is equally amazing, if not famous. They felt that actually it would be better if Kevin and David didn't see the movie because they would be so anxious about the response. The best thing would be if they saw the movie along with the audience response, because Kevin and David can both get a little obsessive about things, and it was very difficult to know, and we kind of always left it open that they could watch the film, but instead we wound up choosing to show it to just his parents, and they encouraged Kevin to, and he's a very courageous guy anyway, he couldn't have done these insane tricks. He does these snowboarding, like, triple spins in the half pipe and just incredibly courageous stuff. So he's a courageous guy. But I still think the most courageous thing he ever did was not watch that film till Sundance world premiere. But then you're dealing with David, his brother with Down syndrome, was howling and sobbing loudly through the first screening he saw, which was so intense and harrowing. And we have had other screenings because one of the people in the film does not live, and it's incredibly sad. And a lot of the stuff that you go through is very dramatic, especially if you're in the world of extreme sports. And we had a screening at the X Games, and people were just sobbing. And so it's like an unbelievably harrowing experience to be in the audience with people who are responding so personally and so so full of grief. And yet I think actually it was amazing. And then we had somebody at the X Games who then died, who'd watched the film a couple of days earlier, and just terribly sad sort of world to be in. But anyway, but this was kind of a hairy experience for me, which was like not showing it. I've never done that before. I guess I have actually, because Toronto with Blindsight, none of them had seen it, now that I think about it. But they all loved it. But usually you'd think you would show it to people. No, I think of myself as someone who always shows it to people before, but I realize now it's very case by case, actually. because it is very difficult. Now we should wrap up. I want to, Joanne's waving. I would encourage people to come to screenings and also catch us outside if there's more questions. And I was just going to go through and say, when are people's films screening? Because I'm sure that everyone is now going to be really hungry to see what you've been talking about.
I have a screening coming up at 12:20 today, and then Monday morning.
Great.
It's screening with Shepherd and Dark.
My film is screening tomorrow at noon, and also to answer your question, it'll have its PBS national broadcast premiere on May 10th at 9 o'clock. So.
Yeah, awesome. Let's see, both Ben and Sam and I's short docs are in the short docs program playing today at 3:20, the Varsity, and then again tomorrow at 6:20. Is that right?
3:20 tomorrow.
3:20 today, 3:20 tomorrow, and then 6:20 on Monday.
Great. And my film's at 6 today in the Armory, and then my shorts are playing tomorrow morning. Thank you so much, everybody. That was so fun.